So when we started working on application, the idea was that we want to solve the problem in a large scale for organization.
All right, and we are live. So, hello and welcome to another episode of SourceLife. And today we have with us Yuval, is the founder and CEO of Amplication, and we also have Tomer Barnett, the CEO and co-founder of Novo. Hi, Tomer and Yuval. How are you guys doing?
Hi guys. Great. Thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
I'm personally really happy to have you on board with us because we at some point and somehow have a lot of crossovers with application between the communities and the people that you guys are working with. But I would like, Yuval, if you could maybe give a little bit of intro about yourself and about application, what you guys doing.
Yeah, I would love to. So I'm 43 from Tel Aviv, founder and CEO of Amplication. Um, Dealing with software development since I was a kid, since I remember myself. In the last 13 years before working on application, I was working in a company called Kinomi, VP R&D and CDO. And we actually started working on application in order to resolve a very painful problem that all developers suffer from, like all the repetitive coding, boilerplate coding, infrastructure code that change often, all the boring stuff the developer need to deal with. And instead, we want to give developer the power to work just on what matters and the actual code that bring the value to the organization. I would love to maybe share some more details during the talk, but more or less, we are funded, 15 employees already, working on an open source project. So the product is open source. Launched it a year and a half ago. Already have a very solid community with thousands of developers around the world contributing, helping, using. I think journey very similar to Novo, and I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. But let's dive right into talking about how this actually works. So, could we maybe touch the subject of the open source adoption in kind of in an enterprise kind of sphere and how enterprises get open source? How does it work?
Um, so when we started working on application, the idea was that we want to solve the problem in a large scale for organization. The product should be eventually B2B in motion, not only in marketing, but also in sales and usage and everything. But the decision was made very early to go with open source, bottom up, PLG, and all the different buzzwords just because I think it's very critical for application specifically and for many other developer tooling to first build the trust with the developers. So, they talk about when they talk about PLG, they always say that instead of letting the C level or a manager come to the employee and say, hey, use this, the employee should come to the manager and say, I want to use this. And it's even more critical when talking about developers. It gets much more amplification when talking about developers and the tools they choose to work on. So we made a decision to go with open source, of course, not only because of the go to market, but because the actual product is led by the motion from the community, by idea from the community, contribution from the community, and so on. But the end goal is to be able to provide this solution in scale to large organizations, to businesses, to large teams and of developer, and not just individuals. So this is where the motion starts and changes a lot. Not only in the selling processes or the acquisition processes, but also in the product itself. The features for an individual are different than the features for teams, and obviously when the user is even a different persona. So individual developer that do end to end or full stack is different than a developer who only focus on backend, or only a developer who just want things to work in order to ship some POC. Is different from a team that needs the privacy, security, performance, and all that. So it makes a lot of difference, and it changed dramatically.
I think there's also something to mention here about looking to not only the selling cycle, but how product is being adopted. When you go open source, a lot of the time you have the ability to basically become a new standard for engineers. And in that regard, whether you are an enterprise developer or an individual one, the open source motion does give you a lot of benefits because engineers from said companies can find you out, realize how you're able to solve their problems, whether that may be notification, analytics, code scaffolding. All of them are basically good positions to become a new standard for said engineers. And then looking into how enterprise are being adopted, as you've already mentioned, on the top to bottom approach usually was, the CTO, VP R&D, someone from the C exec would basically say, "Hey team, we're going to use that." But specifically for developer, it doesn't tend to work like that because when an engineer get a task, they usually are the owners as to how it's going to be implemented. Not always, but it is a big shift. And so, if the engineers can find something that is helpful in open source, they're more than likely to try and use it for production purposes, whether you are an enterprise or small company. And in that regard, what you've all said about the big differentiation between am I a single developer or am I enterprise becomes a huge question as to the features and capabilities.
Yuval, could you maybe elaborate on how you came to realize when will be the right time to kind of shift the gears and go to the next stage of the development of the project and the company?
Well, I think that wasn't planned in advance, but there was a time when we decided, all right, this is a good time. We are ready. And one other thing that was not planned and played differently than I planned was the stage where we raised the seed round, because we had the opportunity to run without funding for more than a year since we launched. So there was no pressure from anyone to start talking about monetization or so we actually had the opportunity to build the product the way we wanted to do it. Of course, there was some pressure of we need to bring money home somehow, but that's part of the life of entrepreneurs, and that's counted. But other than that, we had the privilege to grow our community, to build a product, to get feedback, to change the product, to evolve, to find a nice, the better persona who's using the product, to find the better use cases, and so on. And when we went ahead and raised the seed, that was kind of our plan. All right, we need to raise the seed in order to build our enterprise edition and our enterprise offering, and do this transition from open source individual contributors or individual developers and small teams to a product that serve big organization, both in use cases, the scale of the team, the scale of the project, and different characteristic of the product that is required only by I would say enterprises or big organization and businesses in general.
It's it's interesting to see basically how you guys moved ahead. So I knew Yuval before the actually fundraised, and it's so funny to see how the team is grown and how they're adjusting and adding new features and moving into the more enterprise motion. Um, and I have some learnings that I think are rather similar to you, which at some point you realize, oh, I'm actually moving faster in some regard, and now I need to, okay, should I adjust right now to be more enterprise ready? Should I not? It's really interesting to see that from the side, because obviously in Novo I have full context as to what's going on. It doesn't necessarily that's the case for application, because I can basically see whatever is being developed on code, whatever I can hear from you and from your team, but it's not full context, and it's really interesting to see on the way you adjust and move forward to be more B2B ready, I would say, right? Basically, we both are very much open source ready. Everyone can kind of use, and that's fine. But to become more and more B2B ready, that's a differentiation there.
Absolutely, and it's not just by features, but more, in addition, about the story or about the actual solution. So, application generates code for the developer, and by definition, we are very opinionated in the way we generate code, by stack, by standards, by format, best practices, and a lot of stuff. And it's great, developer in the ICs and freelancers and even small teams that don't come with this baggage of best practices and how to do stuff. They just adopting what we're doing for them. They are happy with that. They customize it, but they just accepting it. But when talking about enterprises and big organizations, we found out that the big advantage is to allow them to generate their own code. So instead of just generate for them what we decided to generate, we generate for them what they want. So this is where the entire idea of the plugin system. We're right now just a few weeks ahead from releasing a plugin system which will allow any developer in the community, in an organization, in application team, or third party to build their own plugins to integrate into the code generation process and impact the code generation. And for that, we find out that instead of talking with developers in the organization, we're suddenly talking with the infrastructure or platform or core team in the organization that is in charge of best practices and boilerplates and how to do stuff. And they want to have this control in order to take their own best practices and put it into the system. So this is kind of the evolution. Once you start getting this feedback from the users, and it's a different type of user, so the product evolved with that.
Exactly. And there's one other thing, kind of really important, I think, in the eyes of whomever is going to use application. And that's kind of gives you one of the big reasons why a lot of big companies use Angular as opposed to React. I'm not saying it's all of them, but at least it was one of the biggest reasons. When you have hundreds of developers working for the team, you have to make sure that there's some consistency and reliability into how code is being delivered and shipped. And when you are unopinionated, when you don't have best practices of your actual team, it becomes significantly harder to do. And using solution like application kind of say, you know what, that's the boilerplate, that's the best practices, that's my opinion on how it should be done. And now when you need to deliver your actual core value, all the rest is basically taken care of for you. So now you only need to write whatever it is relevant for you, but all the rest is kind of that's it, it's working. So I think while it's nice for ICs to use application, or for that matter, in fact, any code generation, it's almost mandatory for bigger organizations, because otherwise they need to develop their own best practices, develop their own uh, um, processes, and it's a hustle.
Um, Eventually, the project or the company will need to face some requests, something that will require from the company to decide if they are going to concentrate and focus on maybe providing custom features or dashboards or things like that, or not. And just how do you guys address it?
Yeah, so I think this is a very big challenge to try to provide a solution for two type of different personas in one product. Um, but still there are many similarities. So the developer in an enterprise is not that different from an IC, a freelance developer or developer in a small business, but still there are some differences, and we will need to mitigate that. We will need to find a way to do that correctly. I think one of the power of open source, it's eventually because it's an engine that drives the motion toward the businesses and enterprises. So it's not going to be smart to harm the open source, obviously. So we just need to do it smartly. We just need to find a balance between providing both ways, and always the community have the option to keep building the open source feature, even if they are not on the top priority list for the enterprise edition, for example.
And there are two main reasons why you would go open source. One of them plays really into your strong suit. The other one is just um, part of your strategy. And so the small part is, let's say, if you see people are more willing to adopt open source because it's to some extent easier for them, because now they don't have to go through a long kind of cycle into other people within the organization, then that's basically a small hack in the go to market process. But if you are building a new development standard, just like Yuval is saying, then you have a full-on community working with you. And so it's not only you're able to get contribution from other developers, some of them could potentially be developers for big enterprises, right? And so if you need to implement SSO, they'll be perfect to help you do that, because not only they know what SSO means, which a lot of startups don't, they actually implemented that and they know what the hardship in it.
Usually the most visited page, or at least the most search kind of page or section in a marketing website or in a company website, is the pricing. So what will you suggest to those founders and entrepreneurs, kind of how to get to this problem, or how to get into this mindset that it's fine to eventually get to the point where it will be monetized?
I think it's even the other way around, because I added the pricing page more than a year ago to our website just because people wanted to see it. It's not that you need to convince developer it's okay to charge. They want to make sure it's a sustainable business. It will stay there for a long time. They will not take a chance on a project that will disappear after a while. So I invented, I just came up with a pricing model, something that I imagine that will make sense in the future. I put it on our website. I said it's free for now, but this is going to be our pricing model in the future, because people were looking for it. And that's true. You said that people must visit the pricing page. I don't think it's only to make sure how much it costs and what will it cost, but also I found it very easy to understand the product from the pricing page.
Yeah, I think it's dead on. I think, first of all, just like Kiva just mentioned, we're getting on a weekly basis, dozens of requests of, how much is that going to cost? And it's to be expected because we have no pricing page right now. I think, as an engineer, so engineers are very, kind of, I think a lot of them are kind of going to the end goal. And if I'm looking at a solution and say, okay, that looks interesting. Okay, so how much does it going to cost me, and what am I getting? And so, kind of the pricing page, because it's very to the point, needs to be able to tell you the quick story of what are you getting and how much it's going to cost you.
I see. Could you maybe touch slightly all what the sales cycles are about? I mean, what the difference between every cycle and how founders and entrepreneurs should look at it?
So yeah, obviously we already talked about the differences between type of users and the need of different users, and it's also impact the sales and onboarding of different type of users. So, the most obvious thing is that when you sell to enterprises, they have all these checklists. If you're not completing the checklist with all green checks, you cannot sell them. So you need to have all the regulation depends on the vertical or whatever, if it's SOC 2 or ISO or PCI or whatever. You need to have certain sets of method for GDPR, for privacy, or audit logs and so on. But that's the easy part. So it's a yes or no. You just need to do it. And obviously, when talking about PLG, when talking about bottom up, once you have the users that already know the product, they already try the product, they already either like it or not, it's a total different story, and it makes the sales easier if you can come to an organization, large or big, and say, "Hey, your user already using it," and we have instead of different type of silos in the organization, each one use it differently, and so on. Maybe we can have everything all organized, and you get the governance, and you get all the monitoring and then visibility on your organization and users. So it makes a difference. But obviously, it's needless to say that selling to big organizations is much more difficult than selling to smaller ones, startups, and others.
Okay. So I would like maybe if we could touch the criteria for pricing, how you look at it, and what should kind of cost something and what should stay open source, and how to differentiate, how you kind of set the boundaries between what is going to be paid for and what's not.
So I think as an open source project, and a project that was obviously free since day one, the idea is first not to make things full charge or behind a paywall just because. So if something is part of the core of the product, and something is a feature that like nobody can use application without code generation, of course, or sync with GitHub. So it doesn't make sense to come one day and say, "Hey, from now on, it's going to be behind the firewall. You need to pay for that." So when building open source, it's really, really important to make sure you keep the core open source, even if it's like open core and you have parts that are not open source, and for free, unless it costs you money. So if the solution is hosted, and okay, it's open source, but I'm providing you the SaaS and hosted solution for the same project, and it costs me money to send notification. It costs me money to run the build. It costs me money to do something for you. So obviously, this is a good reason to charge for, but not always. So it's not that we solve that, and it's not that we have all the answers already. We are in a journey. This is part of the process to always get the feedback, always try to see what's working, what's not working, and change.
But for open source companies, a lot of the time, you you need to make sure that whatever you're featuring as core value for developer is still available at the open source offering, and it's almost impossible to take things back from open source and put it again into some sort of a closed wall or a paywall. Usually, you get like community backlash. It's not going to work. And so, looking into how you're going to decide what's going to be paid and what's not going to be paid, what you can do is if something is very much, or at least you perceive it's very much business value and it's not developer value, you can consider to just put it behind the paywall. But you need to make sure it is, as Yuval mentioned, it does convey some sort of value to the business, and it's not as easy as you would think, right? I mean, debuggability is definitely something for developers. It doesn't mean that observability is something that the business value. It might be, but it might be analytics instead. And you need to be able to price based on what of those two is actually meaningful for the business you're working with.
Absolutely. So thinking about how commercial open source or open source project in general, at least starting their journey, what is the stage that you should think or already be monetized? Is it before or after round A?
So I think our audience need to know that this podcast is recorded in December 2021, and you can easily go for a round with open source KPIs, and you don't need any monetization, and all fun. But since you're not, and it's September 2022, I think it's going to be much harder for open source project or open source startup to go and raise a round with no evidence for willingness to pay at least, or some early traction of monetization. So yeah, it's possible, and it really depends on how good your open source KPIs are and so on. But even from a perspective of optimization of round A, as an entrepreneur, you want to go and do round A with your best state, and that meaning that the more question you answer, the better you can make your round A. And in application right now, our goal is to show the to find product market fit in general and show early signs of willingness to pay from big organizations. So we decided not to put a paywall for anything to do with individual contributors or open source developers like projects and even small businesses. This is where we are.
Before we'll jump to the last part of this interesting discussion, could you maybe share with us briefly a turning point in application? Maybe it was your first customer or something that really was excited for you, or something that you kind of really celebrated a while back or maybe recently?
Yeah, absolutely. January 21, 7 p.m. Israel time. We launched on Hacker News, and that was really a big turning point. It's not like a turning point, but that's like a major milestone that made a difference. That's what our first launch, and just we put it on Hacker News. We started getting like thousands of stars over a weekend, thousands of signups, people talking about it, people suggesting features and ideas and pull requests and community contributions. And it's like boom, one day everything just opened.
That was really crazy. Like I haven't expected it to be so specific, but amazing. I mean, that's great. So next week, I think you going on releasing the enterprise pricing or something that could you maybe elaborate on that?
So yeah, we're launching V1, which includes a lot of the enterprise edition feature we've been working on, especially the plugin system and support for or better support for microservices, better integration with GitHub. Very exciting version with a lot of really great feature that we've been working on for the last month. So yeah, it's exciting, and that's what like I said, it's part of the journey of transforming from open source community edition only product to an enterprise edition product, talking about different exactly talking about different use cases, different type of users, and something that will bring us a step closer to product market fit, monetization, and everything we talked about today. But in general, the idea of delivering this concept of generating code for the boilerplate and repetitive task, but in scale. So instead of just like one monolith project with REST API or Graph API, database, and server, business logic, authentication, authorization, which is amazing and proved itself so far, you get an option to create the entire microservice architecture with message brokers and API gateways and all the DevOps infrastructures and everything around it. You get much more and will allow you to build things in much greater scales, monorepo support and stuff like that. which is truly exciting. And we've been working very hard. The team, we've been, yeah, it is. And the team has been working very hard, and it's still, we are two weeks ahead, and we still have.
Uh, but I'm really waiting to see that. I think what you said is, is so it's on point. I think the big differentiation between selling to some small businesses as to sell to big enterprises is: are you a small technical feature, or are you a full functioning product helping me solving an actual problem? I mean, it's nice to be a small technical thing, don't get me wrong, but if you want to be able to sell in big numbers to big clients, you need to make sure you are an actual product solving them an actual problem. And that way they can say, you know what, I don't want to deal with this problem. I'm more than happy to pay you the money to take care of it.
I mentioned the plugin, and we talked about it already, and I will just remind you now because we are recorded. I promised you that one of the first plugins in our ecosystem will be a plugin to integrate Novo into the product. So developer will be able to easily just install the Novo plugin and get all the code that's required in their infrastructure in order to start send notification. And that's part of the amazing opportunity that comes with building the plugin system.
Well, we are all celebrating that, and the Novo community probably will be very excited to hear it. And the fact that we kind of really recording this episode really close to this V1 event is an amazing opportunity for us to kind of help you guys out and bring out the word. So we are really happy. And Yuval, maybe you could also share, like, again, briefly, maybe some advice or something to with our listeners, to maybe early entrepreneurs or founders, something that you might find helpful to them.
That's funny. I hear the podcast with Elon Musk, and they ask him the exact same question, with maybe phrased a little bit different. And his answer was, if you need advice or if you need encouragement to be an entrepreneur, so don't be. So it's going to be a tough road for entrepreneur, and you're going to suffer a lot, and you're going to struggle a lot, and you're going to have a lot of challenges, and you just need to go along with that. You need to cooperate with that. You need to be able to adjust. I don't think there is like one advice beside just choose the right people to go with you in the journey, because they will make the biggest difference for everything.
So something that I really love about the open source ecosystem is the fact that those kind of collaboration between project is possible. So we are really happy to collaborate with the Amplication in any way we can. And I want personally, and from on behalf of our listeners, thank you, Yuval, and thank you, Tomer, for being here. You guys were awesome. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Let me just take this opportunity to ask the audience to join our Discord channel and go to our website and try Amplication and share the feedback. If you heard this podcast before the launch, so we would love any love and help and support on launching. It's going to be on Product Hunt and Hacker News and others. So show us your love, and thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure. I know Tomer, and I always love to discover new things about him and Novo, and you're doing a great job, guys.
Yeah, I really enjoy bringing your friendship and your kind of relationship to this recording stage. And also a quick note about the event that is going to happen really soon. We are, as Yuval and Tomer said, in September 2022, and we will have Oktoberfest really soon in the end of this month and basically next month. So this is a great opportunity, a great celebration for open source communities to kind of get to know how to be more involved and how to develop this ecosystem. And this is a great opportunity to join and discover. So thank you a lot for joining, and see you on the next episode.
Thank you. Bye bye.